This temporary hospital looks a lot like a military field hospital or an emergency shelter set up in response to an earthquake or a flood, but it's not great for housing patients with infectious disease.
But when a spokesman for China's foreign ministry jumps on the tinfoil hat bandwagon to accuse the US military of unleashing a deadly disease that has infected some 180,000 people in more than 130 countries, it begs closer scrutiny to understand what exactly is going on.
Doctors now say the virus can be transmitted from person to person.
Cordons have been erected around cities, but also around entire provinces, as well as city districts and even every housing complex.
I'm a little upset with China, I'll be honest with you, because as much as I like President Xi and as much as I respect the country, they should have told us about this.
US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hit out at Beijing, accusing China of hiding facts and suppressing information even now. Crucial information that can help save lives of thousands.
In a time where an individual's freedom of speech is considered as a basic human right, it is astonishing to see how many of us still live in the shackles of oppression. Humanity has thrived upon its search for truth, yet recent years have proven how easily the truth can be manipulated or censored. The saying, "knowledge is power," is a hallmark of modern society, but this power is often repressed by people who end up doing great damage in search of greater good. Censorship of information is often described by its defenders as means to protect the public from possible threats. However, more often, censorship has become a means through which governments try to control what we think. Social media has provided the benefit of large-scale sharing of critical information to the public. Even general citizens can utilize the technology to share their thoughts rapidly. For a long time, social media has proven to be a medium that is exempt from censorship. The embodiment of the triumph of social media over censorship can be found in the Arab Spring protests of 2011, which were allegedly driven by the internet. There were images and stories of government oppression which were widely shared, and protesters used social media to avoid government censorship and curfews in order to plan their protests. However, events of recent years have ultimately shattered our illusion of complete freedom. Modern regimes are taking every step to overpower our freedom of speech, even in this digital and information age. Welcome to the age of digital censorship.
In the waning days of 2019, Chinese doctors in the city of Wuhan began noticing a strange new sickness among certain patients. It was something nobody had ever seen before. Yet how could even such a giant as China manage to hide an elephant in the room, like the coronavirus in Wuhan, and get away with it? I am your host Yitzchak Wackshell, and today on Zman Stream, we find out.
When people began falling ill with COVID-19 in Wuhan, the Chinese government went to every length in order to control this information. It might seem like an impossible task, as Wuhan has a population of 11 million, with millions of active social media users. And with China itself being home to the most internet users by far, 20% of the world's 3 billion users. By contrast, the United States is in second place with just 10% of the world's internet users. So how could China keep such information from the world? The coronavirus epidemic might seem to have started suddenly, but there were some who gave us a clear warning. On December 30th, 2019, Dr. Li Wenliang, a 33-year-old eye specialist working in Wuhan Central Hospital, first spotted a patient's medical report. The report that caught his eye stated that the patient tested positive for a SARS coronavirus. Li informed a chat group of his medical school classmates and urged them to use protective measures.
Seven SARS cases were confirmed in the Huanan seafood market. The main mode of transmission of the virus is droplet transmission at close range or contact with respiratory secretions of patients. This can cause a special pneumonia that is evidently contagious and capable of affecting multiple organ systems. It is also called SARS. The patients were isolated in the emergency department of a hospital. Everyone, please be careful. That's scary. SARS is back.
Dr. Li and the other doctors continue to share information.
Be careful. The WeChat group of our class has been banned. The latest news is the coronavirus infection has been confirmed, and virus classification is in progress.
However, as the warning went viral, spreading far beyond the small group, he was reprimanded by his supervisor for leaking the information to the general public. Soon he was even interrogated by the Wuhan police for making false comments on the internet.
After investigation and verification by the public security organs, 8 offenders have been summoned and handled according to law. The police will investigate and punish with zero tolerance those illegal acts that fabricate and spread rumors and disrupt social order.
Li was forced to sign and add his fingerprint to a letter in which he admitted his guilt and promised not to repeat the offense. Li went back to work, but on January 7th, he treated a storekeeper from Hunan Wholesale Seafood Market for eye disease. The storekeeper developed a high fever the next day. Concerned for his family, Li immediately booked a hotel room and quarantined himself. On January 10th, Li became feverish and began coughing, confirming his fears. The eye doctor was admitted to a hospital's ICU on January 12th, though it took another 2.5 weeks for a laboratory to confirm his condition as coronavirus. On January 30th, Dr. Li tried to tell the world about how the police were censoring his warnings about the threat. Struggling to communicate, Li spoke with CNN briefly by phone. You can hear the hospital machines pulsing in the background. His whistleblowing garnered global media attention. Li gave several very enlightening interviews about the nature of the unfolding epidemic. 5 days later, Dr. Li Wenliang stopped breathing. Following his demise, social media flooded with intense outbursts of grief and anger. Many people called him a hero.
The way they do things is secretive, and this is the result. This is the difference between a society with democracy and one without.
Thousands of posts demanding freedom of speech, garnering 2 million views, were made within hours of Li's death. They were quickly deleted by China's government censors. Usually, the government of China is able to keep such expressions of sadness and outrage in check. This time, the censors simply could not keep up. In Chinese cities, people are blowing whistles in honor of the whistleblower Dr. Li Wenliang, and isolated in their apartments, shouting in his support. For once, the stoic politicians at the top seemed overwhelmed by the magnitude of the people's outrage over an ordinary man who had been punished just for trying to protect his innocent relatives and friends. Engaging in damage control, the state even dispatched a team to investigate issues related to Dr. Li Wenliang. Although it never issued an official apology, the state did issue a tribute and sent its condolences to Li's family. Dr. Li's death left a huge impact in China. It was a rare occasion that ordinarily obedient Chinese citizens let their frustrations boil over into the open. Rather than hurrying to protect them during a national crisis, Communist Party officials had instead rushed to hide the problem.
He's the hero of China. So even me. So I'm so proud of him. He told people the truth. At the end of December. I think the majority of the people think he's the hero of China. So even me. So I'm so proud of him. He told people the truth at the end of December. And and then he passed away. I think in the second day, and in Wuhan and some other cities, and they held a short morning memory and just raise the mobile phone, turn on the light, and show this for a couple minutes, and then go back to work. They're not thinking about the death, and they admire him, and they suppose Dr. Li is a hero, including me. This is Chinese doctor. I suppose majority of Chinese doctor actually like him.
The example of Dr. Li left many Chinese questioning the methods of their leaders. Meanwhile, new citizen journalists were making waves on their own. A floodgate had opened, one that the Communist Party of China would be hard-pressed to close again. One of this new species of reporters that would become notorious was a clothing salesman from Wuhan named Fang Bin.
Fang recorded several videos the Chinese would have preferred no one ever see. Videos showing long lines of patients waiting to be processed at the hospitals. Patients struggling with the disease, their concerned relatives, and deserted streets. One video clip especially caused an uproar. Its title, 8 Bodies in 5 Minutes. It showed a funeral home van removing 8 body bags from a Wuhan hospital in the space of 5 minutes. The often raw footage was uploaded and viewed in China, a country where media is supposed to be under the strict control of the state. Unable to trust the official state channels for news, people were rapidly turning to alternative sources of information.
You'll get your punishment and pay for your deeds. All anti-communist forces must unite. Even if you arrest me, I am not afraid.
Such as the videos Fang Bin recorded, showing the real-world effects of the disease. On the evening of February 1st, a group of men in full virus protection gear arrived at Fang Bin's door. These people claimed to be from China's Center for Disease Control. They forced their way into his home, confiscated his laptop and cell phones, and hauled Fang off for questioning at a distant police station.
Who's there?
The police.
The police?
Yes, open up.
Why are there so many of you? Stop taking photos. Why are you here?
We're here because of you.
Where are you taking me? What do you want from me?
Come on, open the door.
First, I want to know where you're taking me.
Fang was chastised for igniting a nuclear bomb with his 8 bodies in 5 minutes video, and for not reporting positive things. Oddly, around midnight, the atmosphere suddenly lightened, and the police became friendlier to Fang. Later, he would discover the reason behind this friendly transformation. By then, his videos were being widely viewed and propagated online. Meanwhile, his attorney and his friends had been trying to find him by calling every CDC office. The authorities knew that the more people that knew about Fang, the harder it would be for the authorities to clamp down on him. He was finally released at 1 a.m. There were no taxis available at that time of night. Even after he found a bicycle, it took him 3 hours to get home. 2 days later, Fang Bin recorded a video showing a group of people in front of his home who said they were there to ask him questions. He refused them entry and challenged them to break down his door. Later, he produced a video inside his home in which he expressed his anger at the tyranny he was being subjected to. He claimed his home was surrounded by plainclothes police and he was being held under house arrest.
把你们那样的医生，他们发他们的真实声音压制，甚至训诫。后来掩盖不住了，惊慌、愚蠢的。
The next day, February 9th, he released a video showing a written message. Quote, "All citizens resist. Hand back power to the people." Since then, no one has heard from Fang. Fang gave information to the people hungering to be informed, while professional journalists kept silent. His voice was suppressed merely for giving people what they expected from their government, the truth. This battle between truth and censorship was also fought by another citizen, Chen Qishi. Chen Qishi was a young lawyer from eastern China and already familiar to millions of Chinese for his brash political coverage. Beginning in 2019, protests rage in Hong Kong against the Chinese government. The Communist Party claimed that the protesters were violent and chaotic rioters. However, Chen Qishi traveled there himself and filmed the truth. that the protesters were engaging in disciplined political protests. As a result, he was summoned back to the mainland by the authorities, and his social media account was shut down. But neither the government's political intimidation nor a strict quarantine order could deter Chen from hurrying to Wuhan with his camera as soon as news of the coronavirus outbreak became public. Describing himself as a citizen's journalist, he remarked, "What kind of journalist are you if you don't rush to the front line?" He went on to record interviews with people who had lost close relatives, a woman who broke down while waiting to be treated, and reported on an exhibition center that had been converted into a treatment center. These videos were viewed millions of times. The Chinese government again closed his social media account on a pretext. They began looking for him, calling his parents, demanding to know where he was. At the same time, Chen Qiushi attracted attention from around the world. He told a BBC reporter about the strict censorship he was subjected to. He added that anyone who shared his content was also tagged by the Chinese government. Chen admitted that he was afraid. On one side of him was a deadly disease, on the other, China's vast power.
你不能说一大排人在那躺着，没有医生，躺着有什么用？还需要医生。所以这个问题还是很严重，还有很多的问题没有解决。
But the idealistic man said he would continue to speak about what he'd seen and heard. He was not afraid of dying. Why should I be afraid of you, Communist Party? He asked defiantly. On February 6th, Chen disappeared, just days before Fang Ben would too. The next day, a close friend of Chen reported that Chen's parents had been told their son was quarantined. That was unusual, since Chen had not reported any symptoms of COVID-19. He has not been heard from since.
What was even stranger was that the disappearance of Fang and Chen barely registered on social media in China. This was in sharp contrast to the outpouring of anger and grief at Dr. Li's death. The reason was that the Communist Party was now acting quickly to delete any mention of the maverick journalists as soon as they popped up. While everyone knew that the government censored the news, now it was becoming obvious they were also ruthlessly suppressing the voices of their citizens.
What changed? Early on in the crisis, China's usually vibrant media censorship seemed to have been muted. News stations reported openly about the outbreak and ever-rising numbers of cases and fatalities. People communicated openly about the situation, often posting fearful or critical comments online that were available for anyone to read. Many felt that officials were falling short in their response and could do more to contain the spread of the virus. Others felt that the care provided was inadequate. While it's extremely difficult to guess how many people inside China watched the videos of citizen journalists like Fang and Chen, their reporting does seem to have had a positive effect. Combined with the reporting of professional journalists, they caused an overall easing of the state's tight grip on reporting about the epidemic. In light of how much information was already available, there was only so much the Chinese state could do to clamp down on truthful reporting. Professional news stations, as a rule, were admitting that an outbreak of disease was in progress. Still, they downplayed the extent of the disaster. Official state news outlets had been even more dishonest, painting a false image. They claimed that there was no reason to fear the disease, that the outbreak was completely under control, that life was going on as normal in Wuhan, and that there was adequate medical care in place to deal with an increasing number of cases. However, people who watched the videos of Fang and Chen knew the truth was far different. Then there were the incidents when official Chinese accounts began spreading propaganda, but were busted by Western-based researchers. For example, this image of an apartment building that was claimed to be a miraculously fast-built hospital in Wuhan. An online post from a state-controlled newspaper said that Wuhan was adding 100,000 hospital beds in hopes of handling the epidemic. The number was jarring given official reports that only a few thousand people were infected, and people immediately began to respond with concern. The newspaper, realizing its mistake, quickly deleted the post. The wave of extreme criticism put the government in a very hard spot. It seemed to people like they were more interested in controlling the news than they were in trying to control the virus. Apparently, this bad publicity forced the government to backtrack somewhat. One significant sign of China's easing up on its repression was the government's decision in mid-February to relax the rules for confirming coronavirus cases. That change resulted in a sudden spike in reported cases and evidenced a rare willingness to admit the severity of a domestic problem. Still, by early February, there was a marked change in policy when China's President Xi Jinping announced officials would need to strengthen the guidance of public opinion, in his words. Since then, Western pro-democracy organizations allege over 350 Chinese have been disciplined for the crime of spreading rumors. Censors cracked down on so-called online rumors and were praised for their efforts by the state's public security ministry. The shift in policy seemed to come as criticism within China shifted from local governments to the central government. This was viewed as unacceptable by the Communist Party. That's why President Xi strengthened control over online media. He took steps to provide a different image of the scenario, one in which the triumph of the government would be highlighted. He wanted the traditional media to vividly convey the stirring achievements from the front lines of epidemic prevention and show the Chinese people's unity and spirit of pulling together in difficult times. To that end, the state's central propaganda agency dispatched over 300 journalists to Wuhan and Hubei, the centers of the epidemic. Journalists at the state news agency Xinhua were given updated guidelines. Now, they wouldn't mention anything about the epidemic spread across the world or about the World Health Organization's designation of a global health emergency. Several more weeks into the crisis, the coronavirus had crossed borders and continents, transforming itself into a pandemic. Things had gone very wrong. It hit Italy with a vengeance, eventually infecting tens of thousands and killing thousands, while overwhelming the country's healthcare system. The killer virus spread across Europe and would go on to hit New York City like a thunderbolt. Cities of millions would enter total lockdown, leaving streets and landmarks empty. Meanwhile, the entire world was asking itself the question, couldn't China have done more to prevent this?
But could all of this have been avoided? Could the coronavirus pandemic, which has upended all our lives, have been prevented? Tonight, Sky News can reveal new information which suggests Chinese authorities knew about the virus much earlier than they've admitted. Those inside China tell us this information was deliberately withheld. That the communist government is continuing to lie about the coronavirus's impact, and that the deaths of thousands of people may have been covered up. We'll also take you around the world and hear from experts and those living in the COVID-19 hotspots.
We do know that there are laboratories researching coronaviruses within just a few miles of that food market. Now, the Chinese Communist Party is going to great lengths to conceal what happened in those laboratories.
By fudging figures and lying to the world, some have argued the Chinese Communist Party is to blame for the incredible spread of this deadly virus and the deaths of tens of thousands of people.
If you look at the British government's response, a number of senior politicians have said China's day of reckoning needs to happen very quickly with regard to this virus.
The Chinese government has the firm resolve and has taken serious, vigorous measures to prevent the spread of the disease. This will continue.
I wish they could have told us earlier about what was going on inside. We didn't know about it until it started coming out publicly. China was very secretive, okay? Very, very secretive. And that's unfortunate. But I'm a little upset with China, I'll be honest with you. They should have told us about this. And I did ask them whether or not we could send some people in. They didn't want them.
As more and more details emerged about China's handling of the crisis, people began to suspect that this time, China had gone too far, sending the entire globe into a tailspin of death and economic destruction through its own negligence. Reports emerged from British intelligence that China had been concealing what was going on for some time. Later, U.S. intelligence confirmed the same.
We know about this intelligence report that's been submitted that we know the White House has had for a few days now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this U.S. intelligence community classified report to the White House as reported by 3 officials who did not want to be identified, telling Bloomberg News. And 2 of those officials saying the report concludes that the numbers that China has reported on the coronavirus, in their estimation, are fake.
Some experts in international law have said that China could be legally on the hook for trillions of dollars worth of damage to the world economy.
Let me talk about China for a second, because we just talked with Michael Pillsbury about their duplicitous role in the beginning of this, right barefaced to our face, coming to the United States, coming to see the president when the virus was much stronger than they were letting on. You say that China should pay reparations for their negligence in all of this. How would that work?
No one actually expects China to pay, but countries might be within their legal rights to enact financial countermeasures against China in retaliation. Not only did China act with stunning disregard for the toll of the virus on human life, once the world started putting the blame on them, they cynically began spreading rumors and conspiracy theories, saying that the virus had actually originated in America. China ramped up its English-language disinformation channels to spread the message that the virus didn't start in China at all, and that the Chinese government was blameless in this situation. Although higher-level Chinese officials later walked back the outrageous conspiracy theory and called for cooperation and an end to the rhetoric on both sides, Americans had already caught a glimpse of the lengths China was prepared to go. No one knows what the future may hold. But it's clear that China's relationship with the world will change in some way as a result of this global crisis and China's handling of it.